Yes. Finally, I don't have to paint anymore. Come on, this wasn't worth my soul. Howdy there, folks. It's Sean from Black Star Minis. I've been getting a lot of questions about Rolfer Mini. Questions like, when are you gonna paint X model? How do I achieve this skin tone that you've got? Can I use this model as an NFT? And while two of those are very valid questions, the one that I by far get the most is, how do I paint in this style? So I think to myself, this would be an excellent opportunity to mine for content to show you guys how to do these techniques that I'm doing. So welcome to the very first episode of Wild Magic, where I show you the techniques that I use to paint my models. Also, before you guys ask, in the intro, this dull. Though I did make this myself, and this is also just corn syrup, not blood, so far as you know. For this video, and probably for the rest of the series, we're going to be using one of Tabletop Time's Space Bears. So today, we're going to be doing the technique that I've got the most questions on, that's underpainting. Now, as far as my style of underpainting goes and my interpretation of the technique, it's when you use bright or saturated shadows to increase the color depth on your models, or so that you can get an alternative glowing light effect. And this all begins with either the airbrush, like I have, or you could accomplish this with a dry brush, just so long as we're going to be doing a nice zenithal highlight. For those not in the know, zenithal highlight is just when you use a black primed model and spray it or dry brush it in a bright paint from above or the model's zenith, giving you contrast between the raised portions of the model and the recesses. For this technique, I first give a coat of ivory just to give me a little bit more color interest. Then we're going to be mixing in some pure white to give an extra bright highlight. Now, don't be afraid to be a little bit heavy-handed when you're doing your zenithal, since we're going to need lots of brightness for our next step, which is going to be a saturated coat of contrast paint over the entire model. With this step, we're running an even coat all over with a defined split at the point of your choosing, but for simplicity's sake, we're doing a vertical split separating him from his front to back. Now, as I'm looking at this, it really is magical just how good contrast paint looks when it's coming through an airbrush on a zenithal. Could not recommend it anymore, but obviously you can do this with a brush. Just might take a little bit more time. We don't necessarily care about inconsistency in the coat, we just want to make sure everything is covered. If you are using a brush though, make sure that when you're applying, you wet blend the transition when it's still nice and fluid, just so you get that little purple tone through the middle of the model. Now we're going to get to the part where you have to put down the airbrush or your dry brush and get to the hand painting. For this, I'd recommend using a smaller brush than you may normally be used to. I'm personally using an old Army Painter detail brush, just because the old brush gives me a couple of splaying bristles that give me a little bit more randomness in the textures that I want to apply. What we're doing here is mixing the base tone with our contrast tone so that we can get a transition from our bright shadows into our mid-tone and eventually our highlight. This process is a little bit tedious and it's going to require some patience. Not that any technique is without patience. Since the contrast paint is going to thin down regular acrylics, quite a lot, I might add, I'd recommend using a swatch pad, or in my case, I like to use my thumb since it's right there. It's going to allow you to test not only the viscosity of your paint, but also allow you to remove some of the paint from your bristles, allowing you to have just that little bit more control with this quite thin glaze-like paint. Now, one of the pros of painting in this style is that when you're feeling a little bit lazy on the parts that you don't really want to do, like belts, maybe an energy weapon, you really don't have to put that much work into it to make it look good, since we already have some interesting tones going on in the model. All you have to do is add some ivory to your contrast paint, and then boom, instant highlight that'll look good on your model. This technique also does shockingly well when you're dry brushing your models, gives it a little bit more color interest. If you are going to try this technique, I would warn against rushing your work. This style kind of demands patience from you, and it requires so much mixing of different paints. However, it does allow you to effectively utilize the paint on your palette in ways that you might not think of. It's a technique that turns a model into a wonderful little puzzle to be solved. Just make sure that you don't rush it and try and jam a puzzle piece where it doesn't belong, like I did on the face, and now the face looks a little funky. Oh, and late in the edit update, apparently a couple of you yahoos figured out that I had a Patreon, even though I don't talk about it. So I guess if any of you others want to take a look at it and maybe join, that'd be okay, I guess. So, there's underpainting. Let me know if y'all enjoyed the process, and if you use this technique on your models. I'd love to hear about your results down in the comments. If you enjoy this video, make sure to hit me up with a like. Let me know that you want to see this kind of content again. And if you really do want to see this kind of content again, make sure to go ahead and subscribe so you see all my releases in the future. Now, I have to go seek absolution for my soul for the dark ritual that I performed, but I want you all to remember, be kind to each other, be kind to yourself, and I'll see y'all next time.